welcome back to this week's episode of Thinking Out Loud. I'm your host, Adriana, and today's topic is self-care. And the reason why this week's topic is self-care is the same reason why I was out for a couple weeks. It's because life came at me hard, and it came at me and tumbled me around and dragged me across the floor. And it was really rough for me to get myself out of the funk that I was in this time around. But it inspired me to talk about self-care, and primarily focused on men and how they don't really know what self-care is. The reason I say this is because while I was in my funk, I was asking the people around me like how they get out of a funky area, how they get out of like a negative space that they might be in, right? And a lot of the men in my life, they said they don't do anything. I asked around like what people's self-care routines look like, and I got so interested that I even asked on my Instagram page, men and women, what they practiced and what products they use in the name of self-care. Now, I had some pretty alarming results. Men's response was lotion. Lotion was part of their self care. So that told me one of two things. One, that I think men confuse self care for personal hygiene. And I'm very glad to hear that you guys are staying highly moisturized, because I am telling you, every single guy was like, lotion, lotion, lotion. And I'm not gonna lie, when they first said that, my mind went into the gutter and I was like, ew. But no, they actually meant that they moisturize themselves. Um, so with that being said, I want to talk about the fact that I think people don't really understand what self-care, like true self-care is. And I think the reason why, it's because the self-care industry has been so glamorized. And I say that because I think the self-care industry has made it seem like we have to book something or buy something in order to practice self-care. And the reason why I also confidently say this is because I did my Googles, and back in 2014, the self-care industry was only worth $10 billion, which is still a lot of money as the years have gone by. And I'm sure that you've noticed it too in the last couple of years alone. We've heard more conversations around self-care and preserving mental health and mental health awareness. With that being said, in 2020, the self-care industry has grown from $10 billion back in 2014 to $450 billion industry. That is insane. And that's exactly why I think people don't believe that they can practice self-care. They can't practice self-care in their everyday routine. A lot of people made comments like, "Oh, I just don't have the luxury to do self-care," or "I'm just too busy to do self-care." And some of the men in my life even said, "I don't do that extra stuff. Like that extra stuff is for women." And I'm like, "What extra stuff?" Like self-care is really as simple as taking care of your well-being. The dictionary definition of self-care is defined as the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health, right? So with that being said, there's definitely ways to take care of yourself and preserve your well-being without breaking a budget, without spending a whole bunch of money. And tying it back into like men's mental health, it's so easy to Google self-care and it's like 1,000 different videos and 1,000 different articles and 1,000 different products targeted specifically for women. But when I Googled self-care for men, everything that I found on Google was shaving cream and a razor for your beard and what else? Like beard oil. When you looked it up on YouTube, there was one video that I found useful for men, and that was it. There is nothing on YouTube about self-care for men, but at least what I found was of substance and was very helpful. The self-care techniques um, suggested for men, I don't know why they would only be targeted for men or suggested for men when those are exactly the practices men and women should both be practicing to preserve their mental health, to preserve their bodies, their well-beings altogether. Um, these suggestions came from a professional therapist, and one of the ones that he suggested just so happens to be my personal favorite. So let me get right into that. The therapist did mention that men, but this applies to women as well, will experience burnout, anxiety, deep feelings of isolation, and like feeling very disconnected from themselves when they don't take a moment for themselves on an everyday basis or on a weekly basis to kind of check in and make sure that like you're good, like all the way for yourself, right? The first suggestion for self-care was working out. And that one kind of seems like a no-brainer. You know, we all know that working out releases endorphins, it gets our blood flowing. If we can keep a regular workout routine, not only going to feel great every day because a body in motion stays in motion, but you're going to be you're going to look physically, you're going to look good physically, you're going to feel good physically, right? So that's the first one. The second one is spending quality time with either your friends or family. And what does that mean? That means set intentional time apart for these family members, for these friends, and have meaningful conversations. Talk if you're going through it, if you feel stressed, if you have, like just the burdens of everyday life, you need someone to kind of be able to hash that out with, and when you show vulnerability, other people are more prone or feel more comfortable being vulnerable in return, right? So we know that for women it's a lot easier because we talk about our feelings amongst our group of friends constantly, For the men, I'm aware that men, it's not as easy for them to talk about feelings. So if you're a man who doesn't have someone to talk to, or you feel like you don't have someone to talk to, then maybe the third option is going to be for you. Um, Journaling. This goes for you as well, my ladies. Um, Journaling is a great way to practice self-care because it allows you to get rid of, dump out any excess thoughts that are just cluttering your mind. It also allows you to reflect on your personal growth. Journaling is actually one of my favorite forms of self-care. I also find it to be one of the most effective ways of to practice self-care because it reduces my anxiety levels by 1,000. The thing with that is that a lot of people don't do it because it's hard to see what's troubling you in your mind out in physical form. I think sometimes when you journal and you see what's troubling you, and it either makes it a lot easier to see it written out on paper because you're like, oh, that problem is so small. Or sometimes when you journal it, you're like, wow, like that's actually heavy, and then it makes you acknowledge the fact that maybe you need to ask for help or actually start to talk to someone about what's going on inside of you, right? So that's the third way to practice self-care. The fourth way to practice self-care is take a break, take a lap. If you work in an office setting, if you're stuck inside of your house right now because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, if you feel overwhelmed with like your homework assignments, step away from it. Go for a walk around your neighborhood. Do a couple of jumping jacks. The point is to get your blood flowing, get your mind off of whatever problem is consuming you in that moment so that you can come back to it with a clearer mind, and maybe you're able to defeat it that second time around, And then the fifth one, which is also one of my favorites, and it's also can be one of the more difficult ones, is learn to say no. Learn to say no because saying yes would be doing too much. Learn to say no simply because you want to say no, and respect those boundaries that you create for yourself. That way, whoever you need to listen to those boundaries, they'll follow them as well. And with that being said, all of us have been going through it in one way or another. Every week, it seems like just something new comes up. So, women, continue to take care of yourselves. I think for the most part, women have a better understanding of what they need emotionally. If you're somebody who has men in your life who don't really talk about their problems, or they seem burdened by their everyday, you know, responsibilities, take consideration of them, and if they look troubled, ask them how they're doing. Ask the questions that will allow them to open up to you. Men, if you have friends, if you are also going through it yourself, open the door for that friend of yours, or learn to ask for help, because the burdens that you guys carry, they're not for you to deal by yourself. And on that note, that concludes this video. Thank you so much for watching. This is Thinking Out Loud, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Mwah! Bye!